The digital clocks ticked, counting down to an unseen precipice. In the hushed, anxious chambers of global finance, billions of dollars hung precariously, tethered to an intricate algorithm that promised an unshakable stability, a bedrock of value in the volatile sea of digital assets. Its charismatic architect, a figure of audacious confidence, had famously scoffed at critics, dismissing their concerns as the timid doubts of those unable to grasp true innovation. He had boldly declared that his creation, a decentralized marvel, designed to redefine global finance, was fundamentally immune to collapse, proclaiming that only the foolish would dare to question its perpetual rise, its inexorable dominance. He had, in essence, dared the world to challenge the very foundation of his digital empire. But beneath the veneer of unwavering certainty, a tremor began. It was a barely perceptible crack in the colossal structure of this seemingly invincible system. The air grew thick with a palpable, collective dread, a tension that tightened with every flickering digit on the trading screens. Across continents, in countless home offices and high-rise trading floors, investors and analysts hunched over their glowing monitors, their fingers hovering above keyboards, their faces illuminated by the frantic, often chaotic glow of real-time charts. These charts, once symbols of exponential growth, now depicted volatile, erratic swings, jagged lines that hinted at an impending disaster. Whispers of a depeg began to circulate through encrypted chat groups and financial forums. Initially, it's dismissed with venomous scorn as mere FUD fear, uncertainty, and doubt by the project's fervent believers and its most ardent defenders. They clung desperately to the narrative of an unbreakable system, a revolutionary force that defied traditional economic gravity. Yet, beneath the fervent rhetoric, the cold, hard numbers told an increasingly dire story. The meticulously engineered equilibrium, the delicate balance between the algorithmic stablecoin and its volatile sibling, was visibly beginning to fray. The supposed ironclad peg to the US dollar, the cornerstone of its value proposition, showed alarming signs of strain, its oscillations growing wider, more desperate. A critical threshold was about to be breached, a point of no return that would trigger a chain reaction of unprecedented magnitude. This wasn't merely a localized market anomaly. It was an event poised to send seismic shockwaves far beyond the confines of the cryptocurrency sphere, ripping through the very corridors of political power and forcing governments and financial regulators worldwide to confront a new, terrifyingly complex challenge. What was about to unfold was a financial cataclysm of epic proportions, a spectacular and rapid unraveling that would not only obliterate fortunes but would also forever alter the perception of digital assets, igniting a furious, impassioned, global debate over who truly controls the future of money and how such immense power can be wielded. This was more than just another market correction. This was a fundamental reckoning, and it was about to change absolutely everything. At its zenith, Terra-Luna embodied a revolutionary promise, a stable digital currency, an algorithmic marvel engineered to provide an unyielding foundation of reliability amidst the often currents of the crypto market. Its meteoric rise captivated the imagination of a global audience, drawing in millions of participants, from seasoned institutional investors to individual newcomers eager to claim their stake in what was heralded as the future of decentralized finance. For continuous, in-depth analyses of the most impactful financial and political showdowns shaping our world, make sure to subscribe. At the heart of this unfolding drama stood Kwon, a South Korean entrepreneur whose sharp intellect was matched only by his profound self-belief. Young and visionary, he had founded Terraform Labs with a singular, ambitious goal: to construct a decentralized financial system, an alternative to traditional banking that would be both stable and utterly beyond the reach of conventional regulators. Kwon cultivated an image of the defiant disruptor, a tech titan ready to challenge the old guard. His public pronouncements were often laced with a theatrical bravado, a dismissive contempt for anyone who dared question his algorithmic masterpiece. He famously declared that the majority of companies in the crypto space would eventually die, but his creation, Luna, would stand the test of time, asserting its dominance with an almost prophetic certainty. This wasn't merely confidence. It was an audacious dare to the established order, a challenge to the very notion of oversight. In a striking display of his unshakable conviction, Kwon once publicly offered to bet $1 million that his stablecoin would maintain its peg, a theatrical gesture designed to silence critics and reinforce the perception of invincibility. He openly mocked those who raised concerns about the system's sustainability, labeling them as poor and unimaginative for failing to grasp the revolutionary potential he envisioned. Even as the early tremors of instability began to ripple through the market, Kwon remained steadfast, almost defiantly so, often appearing on social media to dismiss fears as unfounded noise, a mere distraction from the true path of innovation. Arrayed against this potent blend of innovation and arrogance were the methodical, often slow-moving but ultimately relentless forces of state authority. These were not singular, charismatic figures, but rather a collective of seasoned financial regulators, meticulous investigators, and unyielding legal minds from across the globe. Their backgrounds were rooted in the established frameworks of law and economics, their motives driven by a dual imperative to protect the vast number of individual investors who had poured their life savings into this new digital frontier, and to uphold the fundamental integrity of global financial markets. They symbolized the enduring power of the state, the necessity of oversight, and the often grinding yet ultimately resolute pursuit of justice. In the immediate aftermath of the collapse, while Kwon maintained a defiant silence or issued dismissive statements, these governmental bodies swung into action, albeit with an initial, almost stunned recognition of the scale of the disaster. Imagine hushed emergency meetings in the capital cities, financial watchdogs poring over complex blockchain data, their initial bewilderment quickly giving way to a grim determination. They moved with a deliberate, almost procedural patience, a stark contrast to the frantic pace of the collapsing market. One by one, agencies in the United States, South Korea, and elsewhere initiated formal investigations, meticulously gathering digital breadcrumbs and investor testimonies. Their approach was authentic, grounded in legal precedent and factual inquiry, eschewing the theatrical pronouncements of the crypto world for the quiet, persistent work of building an airtight case. They understood that this was not just a market failure, it was a test of the state's ability to assert its authority in a new, borderless digital realm. Their preparation involved cross-border cooperation, forging alliances between international law enforcement agencies to track the movement, efforts, funds, and the individuals responsible. Unlike Kwon, who seemed to thrive on public spectacle, these officials worked largely behind the scenes, their actions guided by statutes and regulations, slowly but surely tightening the net around the architect of the collapse. This was the clash, the boundless ambition of unchecked innovation against the unwavering, albeit patient, might have established legal order. As the digital dust settled on the financial wreckage, Kwon's public posture shifted, but his underlying defiance remained. He attempted to pivot, proposing a revival plan for the Terra ecosystem, a so-called Terra 2.0 that was met with widespread skepticism and anger from the very community he sought to rebuild. This move, perceived by many as an audacious attempt to escape accountability by simply starting anew, only deepened the resolve of his growing list of adversaries. While he continued to engage on social media, his tone became increasingly evasive, and eventually, he retreated from the public eye, his whereabouts becoming a subject of intense speculation. This period of quiet disappearance only served to fuel the suspicions of the authorities, transforming him from a controversial innovator into an international fugitive. His flight from South Korea, purportedly to Singapore and then later to Montenegro, became a dramatic subplot in the unfolding legal saga, a desperate attempt to outmaneuver the long arm of the law that was now actively pursuing him across borders. This evasion, a clear indicator of his reluctance to face the consequences of the collapse, starkly contrasted with the patient, meticulous work being done by the very institutions he had so frequently disparaged on the global corridors of power. A different kind of drama was playing out. Regulatory bodies, financial crime units, and justice departments were coordinating with an unprecedented urgency. This was not a theatrical performance but a highly organized, multi-jurisdictional manhunt. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, a formidable force in global finance, launched a comprehensive investigation, meticulously dissecting the algorithmic stablecoins mechanics and the marketing claims made by Terraform Labs. Their motive was clear: to protect the integrity of financial markets and hold accountable those who defrauded investors, regardless of the technological novelty involved. The moment of truth arrived. FaZe Banks, radiating a defiant bravado, began his counteroffensive. His strategy was classic misdirection, a well-rehearsed performance designed to obfuscate, deflect, and ultimately discredit his accuser. He leaned into his established persona, oozing a confident disdain for the noise and haters. His initial volley was a dismissive wave of the hand, a theatrical sigh, as if the very notion of accountability was an irritating interruption to his genius. He began not with a defense of his actions, but with an attack on the credibility of the analyst, painting him as a disgruntled outsider, a nobody desperate for attention, envious of FaZe Clan's astronomical success. He deployed buzzwords, vague promises of future innovation, and an almost messianic vision of his role in the crypto space, carefully avoiding any direct engagement with the financial specifics of the $MLG token. His voice, usually resonant with casual authority, took on a sharper edge, lashing out with thinly veiled threats and personal attacks. He alluded to the analyst's supposed lack of real-world experience, contrasting it with his own undeniable track record of building a multi-million-dollar empire. He painted the entire controversy as a smear campaign orchestrated by rivals, a desperate attempt to undermine his visionary leadership. He brought up past unrelated successes of FaZe Clan, attempting to pivot the narrative from the alleged rug pull to a celebration of his unassailable business acumen. The air thickened with his manufactured outrage, his carefully curated performance of victimhood as he tried to frame himself as a misunderstood pioneer, unjustly targeted by those who simply couldn't comprehend his audacious vision. He spoke of decentralized dreams and community empowerment, hollow phrases that rang with chilling irony given the accusations leveled against him. He deployed emotional appeals, referencing his loyal fans and the sacrifices he had made for the brand, attempting to leverage their unwavering support as a shield against the damning allegations. It was a masterclass in gaslighting, an attempt to turn the tables and make the accuser appear as the aggressor, the villain in his carefully constructed narrative. He even went so far as to imply that the investors themselves were at fault for not understanding the inherent risks of the crypto market, for daring to believe in the vision he had so enthusiastically promoted. His attack was not based on facts, but on narrative control, on the sheer force of his celebrity, an attempt to drown out the inconvenient truth with a torrent of bluster and carefully calibrated indignation. He truly believed his star power was enough to extinguish the flames of public outrage. But the analyst was not swayed by the theatrics, nor did he allow himself to be drawn into the emotional quicksand of Banks's performance. He stood resolute, a figure of calm defiance amidst the storm of manufactured chaos. He waited patiently for Banks to exhaust his bluster, for the performative outrage to subside, knowing that every empty accusation, every unsubstantiated claim, only served to highlight the hollowness of his opponent's defense. When his turn came, he did not raise his voice, nor did he engage in personal attacks. Instead, he simply, methodically, and with devastating precision, began to lay out the truth. He started not with rhetoric, but with data. He displayed on the screen a series of meticulously compiled blockchain transaction logs, scrolling through lines of code and hexadecimal addresses that, to the untrained eye, might appear inscrutable, but to the informed, told a damning story. He highlighted the initial fundraising wallets, demonstrating how a significant portion of the capital raised for the $MLG token was immediately transferred, not to development funds or liquidity pools as promised, but to a series of opaque, untraceable private wallets, ultimately linked through an intricate web of transactions to known entities associated with Banks and his inner circle. Each highlighted transfer, each dated timestamp was a silent, irrefutable accusation, laid bare for millions to see. He then moved to the white paper, the foundational document for the $MLG token. Once heralded as a groundbreaking vision, he presented side-by-side comparisons of the ambitious roadmap detailed in the white paper with the actual, verifiable progress, or rather, the complete lack thereof. He pointed out promised partnerships that never materialized, technological developments that remained vaporware, and community initiatives that were announced with great fanfare but never launched. The contrast was stark, revealing a deliberate pattern of unfulfilled promises and misleading projections. He cited specific paragraphs from the white paper, then presented undeniable evidence, sourced from public blockchain explorers and archived project communications, that these promises were not merely delayed but had never even been genuinely initiated. It was a cold, hard dissection of a deceptive narrative, proving that the vision sold to investors was nothing more than an elaborate illusion designed to extract capital. Next, he turned to past statements, the very words of Banks himself, meticulously collected from live streams, social media posts, and interviews. He played short, damning audio and video clips, juxtaposing Banks's enthusiastic endorsements of $MLG as a long-term investment, a legacy project, and a game-changer, with a documented timeline of the alleged rug pull. He showed how Banks' public pronouncements about holding his own tokens and being all in on the project were directly contradicted by on-chain data showing large strategic sales from wallets demonstrably linked to him and his associates, beginning almost immediately after the initial public offering. The chilling irony was not lost on the audience. The very words used to build trust were now being used to dismantle his credibility, one damning quote at a time. The receipts were undeniable, the evidence devastating, leaving no room for the bombast and deflection that had been Banks's only defense. The analyst then peeled back another layer of deception, focusing on the very smart contract code that governed the $MLG token. With the assistance of on-screen visual aids, he highlighted specific lines of code, explaining how they contained backdoor functions that allowed for the unilateral manipulation of liquidity and supply, features notoriously absent in legitimate, community-driven projects. He demonstrated how these hidden functionalities were exploited to lock out ordinary investors from selling their holdings, while simultaneously allowing a select few, specifically the wallets linked to Banks and his associates, to execute massive privileged sales before the market could react. This was the technical heart of the rug pull, laid bare for anyone with an understanding of blockchain mechanics to see, not a flaw, but a pre-programmed feature designed for exploitation. It revealed a cold, calculating premeditation embedded within the very digital architecture of the token. He further produced archived communication, logs from the official $MLG Discord and Telegram channels, dating back to the token's launch. These logs, previously dismissed by Banks as mere community chatter, were now presented as evidence of a coordinated effort to suppress dissent and manage information. The analyst pinpointed instances where legitimate investor concerns about liquidity or development progress were met with immediate bans, dismissive remarks, or outright gaslighting by moderators demonstrably linked to the FaZe clan ecosystem. He contrasted this with the overwhelmingly positive, almost euphoric tone carefully cultivated in official announcements, revealing a stark dichotomy between the public facade and the private reality of controlled information. This expose demonstrated that the alleged rug pull wasn't just a financial manipulation, but also a psychological one, preying on the trust and good faith of the community. The air in the digital arena grew thick with the unspoken realization of the depth of the alleged betrayal. FaZe Banks, stripped of his usual composure, became a visibly agitated figure. His earlier theatrical indignation had evaporated, replaced by a raw, unvarnished frustration. He paced restlessly, his eyes darting, his attempts to interrupt becoming more desperate, less articulate. The veneer of untouchable celebrity had begun to crack under the relentless onslaught of irrefutable data. His face, once so carefully controlled, now betrayed flickers of genuine panic. He resorted to personal insults that lacked their earlier performative polish, revealing only his increasing desperation. He stammered, contradicted himself, and stumbled over words, unable to mount a coherent defense against the mountain of evidence that continued to pile up against him. The audience, once captivated by his charisma, was now witnessing the humiliating unraveling of a meticulously crafted persona, exposed not by counterarguments, but by the cold, hard logic of his own digital footprints. The king of hype was being undone by the unyielding power of the receipts, and there was nowhere left for him to hide. The silence from his usually fervent supporters in the chat became deafening, replaced by a growing tide of outrage and a dawning realization of the magnitude of the alleged deception. The analyst, observing FaZe Banks' increasingly erratic behavior, the stammering, the darting eyes, the flailing attempts at deflection, knew the moment was ripe for the final, annihilating blow. He did not introduce a new, isolated piece of evidence, but rather unveiled a meticulously reconstructed timeline, a digital blueprint of the entire $MLG operation from its inception to its calculated demise. The era of move fast and break things in digital finance was decisively over, replaced by a sober recognition that innovation, however revolutionary, could not come at the cost of systemic stability and investor safety. The Terra-Luna implosion served as a stark, undeniable warning. Unchecked digital expansion, left to its own devices, carried the potential for not just economic disruption but widespread social and political unrest. This political showdown was no longer theoretical. It was a concrete battle for the future of finance, with governments determined to reclaim control over a burgeoning yet volatile new frontier. The Terra-Luna collapse served as an undeniable, visceral proof point for policymakers who had long warned of the inherent dangers lurking within the largely unregulated digital asset space. Suddenly, the abstract concept of an algorithmic stablecoin's fragility transformed into a tangible, multi-billion-dollar catastrophe that directly impacted the economic well-being of their constituents. This was no longer a niche financial experiment, confined to tech enthusiasts. It was a systemic shock that threatened to spill over into traditional markets, demanding an immediate and robust governmental response. The very notion of financial stability, a cornerstone of state sovereignty, was directly challenged by the rapid, cascading failure of a supposedly stable asset. This forced governments to confront the uncomfortable truth that their existing regulatory frameworks were woefully inadequate for the speed, scale, and borderless nature of decentralized finance. The political consequences were swift and far-reaching. Legislators who had previously approached crypto with a mixture of curiosity and caution now faced intense pressure from an enraged public and a suddenly urgent imperative to act. Debates in national parliaments and congresses shifted dramatically, from whether to regulate, to how to regulate, and how quickly. Treasury departments and central banks, traditionally the bastions of financial oversight, began to sound increasingly alarmist notes, warning of contagion risks and the potential for digital assets to undermine conventional monetary policy. The Terra-Luna event became the definitive case study, providing irrefutable evidence for those advocating for stringent oversight, robust consumer protection laws, and even outright bans on certain types of digital currencies. The political landscape was irrevocably altered, with a clear mandate emerging for greater state intervention in what had once been lauded as a truly free, ungoverned market. Moreover, the crisis immediately exposed a gaping hole in international financial governance. The borderless nature of cryptocurrency meant that a financial collapse originating in one jurisdiction could have devastating ripple effects across the globe, transcending national boundaries with unprecedented speed. This realization spurred an urgent, albeit complex, effort towards greater international cooperation. Global financial bodies such as the International Monetary Fund and the Financial Stability Board intensified their discussions on common regulatory standards, cross-border data sharing, and synchronized enforcement actions. The political stakes here were immense. The future of global financial stability depended on nations' ability to forge a unified front against risks that knew no borders. The challenge was not just about catching individuals like Kwon, but about establishing a new paradigm for collective security in a rapidly evolving digital economy. This global coordination was a tacit admission that no single nation could effectively police the vast, interconnected world of digital assets on its own, demanding a new form of political collaboration. The human element of the Terra-Luna collapse fueled the political firestorm. Stories of ordinary families losing their life savings, retirement funds wiped out, and dreams shattered saturated the media. These personal tragedies transformed a complex financial event into a deeply emotional and politically charged issue. Politicians, often criticized for being out of touch, could not ignore the plight of their constituents. The collapse served as a powerful rallying cry for consumer protection advocates, who leveraged the widespread devastation to push for stronger legislative safeguards and increased accountability for crypto platforms and their founders. The political imperative shifted from fostering innovation at all costs to prioritizing investor safety and market integrity. This was a critical turning point. The political class, initially hesitant to intervene in such a novel industry, now found itself compelled to act decisively, spurred by the undeniable human cost of unchecked digital ambition. The very legitimacy of decentralized models, which promised freedom from traditional financial institutions, was called into question by political leaders who suddenly saw them as potential instruments of widespread public harm. The stakes were no longer theoretical, they were measured in the shattered lives of millions. Kwon's initial strategy was less a calculated defense and more a defiant challenge. From the outset, his public posture was one of unshakable conviction, bordering on hubris. He frequently engaged with critics and doubters on social media, not to placate or explain, but to dismiss their concerns, often with biting sarcasm. He once famously responded to a stablecoin critic by questioning their financial literacy, suggesting they were simply too poor to understand his vision. This was his flawed attack, an attempt to control the narrative through sheer force of personality and dismissive rhetoric, rather than addressing the underlying vulnerabilities of his complex algorithmic system. He propagated a belief in an unbreakable design, a perpetual growth machine that would redefine global finance, actively undermining any notion of regulatory oversight as archaic and unnecessary. This continuous provocative engagement acted as a smokescreen, drawing attention away from the systemic risks that were, in reality, silently accumulating beneath the surface of his digital empire. The strike against his own system came not from an external force but from within its inherent fragility. The intricate design of Terra-USD, meant to maintain its dollar peg through a burning and minting mechanism with Luna, was a house of cards. When market pressures mounted, fueled by large-scale withdrawals and a loss of confidence, the algorithm buckled. The promised stability shattered with terrifying speed. In early May of 2022, Terra-USD began to depeg, sliding first by cents, then by dollars, triggering a panic that became a death spiral. As Terra-USD plunged, Luna, its sister coin, was relentlessly minted in a futile attempt to restore the peg, flooding the market and driving its price towards zero. Billions in market value evaporated in a matter of days, wiping out the life savings of countless investors worldwide. This was the catastrophic receipt of his flawed design, starkly revealing the perilous consequence of unchecked algorithmic reliance. The global reaction was swift and decisive. A methodical takedown initiated by an array of powerful state actors, regulators, and law enforcement agencies, initially caught off guard by the speed and scale of the collapse, pivoted from observation to active pursuit. The first major setup for Kwon's eventual reckoning came from the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. They launched an exhaustive investigation, meticulously dissecting Terraform Labs' operations. In February of 2023, the SEC formally charged Terraform Labs and Kwon with orchestrating a multi-billion-dollar crypto asset securities fraud scheme. The charges detailed how Kwon had allegedly misled investors about the stability of Terra-USD, claiming it was reliably pegged to the dollar when, in fact, its stability was precarious and dependent on continuous market demand. The SEC's complaints cited specific instances where Kwon allegedly touted the reliability of the algorithmic stablecoin, despite private warnings from internal staff about its inherent vulnerabilities, painting a picture of deliberate deception rather than mere market misfortune. This formal legal action was the first major strike from the state, a clear signal that the era of unbridled, unregulated crypto innovation was drawing to a close. Kwon's reaction to this escalating legal pressure was immediate and telling. He fled. His movements became a frantic, desperate attempt to evade the tightening noose of international justice. He first departed South Korea, where prosecutors had already issued an arrest warrant for violations of capital markets law, and reportedly relocated to Singapore. But as the net tightened, his flight continued. This evasion was his countermove, a direct challenge to the authority of sovereign states to impose their will on a truly global, decentralized entity. However, this flight only solidified the resolve of the hero side, the coordinated global authorities. South Korean prosecutors worked with Interpol, issuing a red notice for Kwon, a global alert signifying he was a wanted fugitive. This international collaboration was the next setup for his capture, transforming his personal escape into a high-stakes border-spanning manhunt. The stage was now set for the culmination of this dramatic showdown, not in the volatile digital markets, but in the unyielding courts of law. The relentless pursuit culminated in March of 2023, when Kwon was finally apprehended. In Montenegro, he was arrested at the Podgorica airport, attempting to board a flight to Dubai, found in possession of falsified travel documents, including a Costa Rican passport. This capture was a direct strike from the combined forces of international law enforcement, a resounding receipt for Kwon's attempts to outrun justice. His immediate reaction was to challenge his detention and the subsequent extradition requests, initiating a complex legal battle within Montenegro itself. Both the United States and South Korea swiftly filed their respective requests for his surrender, each asserting primary claim over the disgraced entrepreneur. The U.S. Department of Justice, in particular, unveiled a sweeping 8-count indictment against Kwon, charging him with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, commodities fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy to defraud and engage in market manipulation. These charges, coming shortly after the SEC civil complaint, represented a coordinated next setup in the legal takedown, cementing the criminal dimension of the case. Kwon's legal team in Montenegro fought tooth and nail, arguing on technicalities of jurisdiction and the proper classification of the charges, asserting that the case belonged in South Korea. This prolonged legal skirmish in a small Balkan nation became a microcosm of the larger battle, the state's methodical, unwavering pursuit versus the individual's desperate, multi-pronged attempts to escape accountability. Each Montenegrin court decision, each appeal, further underscored the slow, inexorable grind of justice against the perceived speed and statelessness of the crypto world. The methodical process of legal maneuvering, subpoenas, and international diplomatic pressure continued to build, creating an undeniable narrative of state power closing in, piece by painstaking piece, on a man who once believed himself beyond its reach. The legal net, cast wide across continents, was now drawing ever tighter. The relentless pursuit culminated in March of 2023, when Kwon was finally apprehended in Montenegro. He was arrested at the Podgorica airport, attempting to board a flight to Dubai, found in possession of falsified travel documents, including a Costa Rican passport. This capture was a direct strike from the combined forces of international law enforcement, a resounding receipt for Kwon's attempts to outrun justice. His immediate reaction was to challenge his detention and the subsequent extradition requests, initiating a complex legal battle within Montenegro itself. Both the United States and South Korea swiftly filed their respective requests for his surrender, each asserting primary claim over the disgraced entrepreneur. The U.S. Department of Justice, in particular, unveiled a sweeping 8-count indictment against Kwon, charging him with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, commodities fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy to defraud and engage in market manipulation. These charges, coming shortly after the SEC civil complaint, represented a coordinated next setup in the legal takedown, cementing the criminal dimension of the case. Kwon's legal team in Montenegro fought tooth and nail, arguing on technicalities of jurisdiction and the proper classification of the charges, asserting that the case belonged in South Korea. This prolonged legal skirmish in a small Balkan nation became a microcosm of the larger battle, the state's methodical, unwavering pursuit versus the individual's desperate, multi-pronged attempts to escape accountability. Each Montenegrin court decision, each appeal, further underscored the slow, inexorable grind of justice against the perceived speed and statelessness of the crypto world. The legal net, cast wide across continents, was now drawing ever tighter while the extradition battle raged in Montenegro. A parallel and equally critical legal front was unfolding in a United States court. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, having meticulously prepared their case, brought Terraform Labs and its co-founder Kwon to trial on civil fraud charges. This was the next setup in the methodical takedown, a legal chess match, where the state sought to prove, beyond doubt, that Kwon had defrauded investors. The SEC presented compelling evidence, including internal company communications, that directly contradicted Kwon's public assurances of TerraUSD stability. They laid bare the alleged deception, arguing that Kwon and Terraform Labs had knowingly misled investors about the true nature and risks of their algorithmic stablecoin. The evidence included testimony from former Terraform Labs employees who recounted instances where Kwon dismissed warnings about the system's fragility. The SEC also highlighted a secret deal, allegedly concealed from investors, where a third-party firm was brought in to restore TerraUSD's peg during an earlier crisis, creating a false impression of inherent stability. This systematic presentation of evidence, built painstakingly over months of investigation, was the strike in the legal arena, directly countering Kwon's earlier flawed attack of public bravado and dismissive rhetoric. It was a direct rebuttal to his claims of an unbreakable system, exposing the intricate layers of alleged manipulation and misrepresentation. After a multi-week trial, marked by intense legal arguments and a mountain of digital evidence, the jury delivered its verdict. In April of 2024, the United States jury found Kwon and Terraform Labs liable on all counts of civil fraud. This was the decisive strike from the hero, a profound receipt that shattered any remaining illusion of Kwon's infallibility or his system's legitimacy. The verdict was not merely a legal pronouncement. It was a powerful symbolic victory for regulatory authority, sending an unmistakable message across the global digital finance landscape. It affirmed that even the most complex and novel financial instruments, operating in the ostensibly borderless realm of cryptocurrency, are ultimately subject to the long-established principles of fraud and investor protection under the law. The reaction to this definitive legal defeat, though not a criminal conviction, marked a significant shift from his previous defiant posture. Following the jury's verdict, through his legal representatives, Kwon conceded to the civil fraud finding. This concession, a stark contrast to his earlier public dismissals and his protracted flight from justice, served as the ultimate receipt. In the hero's methodical takedown, it was an acknowledgement, forced by the overwhelming weight of evidence and legal scrutiny, that his algorithmic empire was built on foundations of misrepresentation. This marked the end of his public and legal attack in the civil sphere, transitioning into a phase where the consequences of his actions became undeniable. The next setup in this ongoing saga now shifts to the penalties to be imposed and the continued battle over his extradition to face criminal charges. A final act in the long and arduous process of accountability. The jury's verdict in the United States, finding Kwon and Terraform Labs liable for civil fraud, resonated as a thunderous receipt for the methodical takedown orchestrated by global authorities. This was more than a legal judgment. It was a profound declaration that the principles of investor protection and market integrity would ultimately prevail, even against the most intricate and seemingly untouchable digital architectures. Kwon's subsequent concession to this finding, through his legal team, marked a significant pivot. The defiant posture, the public dismissals, the months of frantic evasion were now superseded by a grudging acknowledgement of culpability, forced by the overwhelming weight of evidence, meticulously assembled by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. This concession, a stark contrast to his earlier public pronouncements of invincibility, served as the ultimate proof that the hero's patient, evidence-based approach had finally broken the villain's resistance in the civil arena. It was the moment where the rhetoric of revolutionary finance collided with the unyielding reality of legal accountability. Yet, even as the civil judgment was rendered, the most dramatic chapter of this showdown remained unresolved: the battle for Kwon's extradition. This was the next setup in the hero's relentless pursuit, a complex international legal and political quagmire. After his arrest in Montenegro, both the United States and South Korea swiftly filed competing extradition requests, each asserting their sovereign right to prosecute Kwon for criminal charges related to the Terra-Luna collapse. For the United States, the charges included conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud, commodities fraud, and securities fraud, representing a formidable legal arsenal. South Korea, equally determined, sought his return to face charges for violations of capital markets law, citing the immense financial devastation wrought upon its own citizens. Kwon's reaction through his Montenegrin legal team was to exploit every procedural loophole and legal ambiguity available. His defense mounted a vigorous challenge to both extradition requests. Leveraging the intricacies of Montenegrin law and international treaties, they argued on technicalities of jurisdiction, the proper classification of cryptocurrency under existing legal frameworks, and the precise sequence of legal processes. This protracted legal skirmish in a small Balkan nation became a microcosm of the larger ideological conflict. The individual's desperate, often theatrical, attempt to escape the grip of sovereign power versus the unwavering, patient determination of states to enforce their writ and protect their citizens. Each Montenegrin court decision, each appeal from Kwon's defense, further underscored the slow, inexorable grind of justice against the perceived speed and statelessness of the crypto world. His strategy was to delay, to confuse, to challenge the very premise of jurisdiction in a borderless digital world, hoping to find a path to freedom or at least to a more favorable legal landscape. Meanwhile, the hero side, the coordinated global authorities continued their methodical work, unfazed by the legal wrangling. The U.S. Department of Justice collaborated closely with South Korean prosecutors, sharing intelligence and coordinating their efforts, even as they competed for jurisdiction. This multinational cooperation was a crucial receipt of their unwavering commitment, demonstrating that even in the face of complex international law, the pursuit of justice would not be abandoned. They meticulously presented their arguments in Montenegrin courts, detailing the severity of the alleged crimes and the global impact of the Terra-Luna collapse. Their persistence symbolized the enduring power of sovereign states to impose order, to ensure investor protection, and to extend their reach into every corner of the global financial landscape. The extradition battle was not merely about a single individual, it was a critical test case for how nations would collectively govern and regulate the burgeoning, often chaotic world of digital finance, setting a precedent for future cross-border crypto enforcement. The long, arduous process of legal appeals and diplomatic negotiations continued, a testament to the fact that even the most audacious digital empire builders would eventually find themselves accountable to the established rule of law. The Montenegrin courts, caught between the competing claims of two powerful nations and a determined defense, issued a series of fluctuating rulings. Initially, a lower court approved extradition to the United States, a momentary strike for the American authorities, but this decision was swiftly appealed by Kwon's lawyers, leading to higher court reversals and remands, each step prolonging his detention and delaying his ultimate fate. The Montenegrin Supreme Court, in particular, played a pivotal role, vacating previous rulings and sending the case back for reconsideration, citing procedural irregularities. This judicial back and forth, a complex dance of legal technicalities, underscored the unprecedented nature of the case and the challenges of applying traditional extradition laws to a figure involved in a global, digital financial collapse. Despite these delays, the underlying pressure from the United States and South Korea remained constant, a persistent setup for Kwon's eventual extradition. The international legal pressure was relentless, demonstrating that the authorities would exhaust every avenue, no matter how protracted, to secure his appearance in their respective courts. Each procedural victory for Kwon's defense was met with renewed determination from the prosecuting nations, ensuring that the legal battle would continue until a definitive resolution was achieved. The prolonged legal struggle in Montenegro became a stark illustration of the unwavering commitment of sovereign states to uphold their judicial authority against those who sought to evade it, a clear message that the long arm of the law would eventually catch up. Finally, after months of intricate legal maneuvers and appeals, a definitive judgment emerged from the Montenegrin justice system. In a pivotal moment, the Montenegrin High Court, following a series of higher court directives, ultimately cleared the path for Kwon's extradition. This ruling, coming after numerous reversals and remands, was the decisive strike for the global authorities, a hard-won victory in their methodical takedown. It signaled the undeniable end of Kwon's protracted flight from justice, a powerful receipt for his flawed strategy of evasion and defiance. His relentless legal challenges in Montenegro, which had once seemed to offer a perpetual reprieve, had finally run their course. The avenues for further appeal were exhausted, and the legal framework, however complex, had delivered its final pronouncement on his immediate fate. Kwon's reaction to this definitive judgment was not a public acknowledgement of guilt in the criminal sense, but rather an enforced cessation of his evasion. The very act of his impending transfer from Montenegro to face charges in either the United States or South Korea served as the ultimate receipt of the hero's success. It was the physical manifestation of accountability, the moment where the abstract concept of justice became concrete. This marked the dramatic conclusion of his attack of flight and procedural delay, leaving him with no further options to escape the reach of the law. The legal system, slow but inexorable, had finally prevailed. The next setup for the hero now shifted entirely to the specifics of his criminal prosecution. With the extradition hurdle cleared, the United States, which had a robust and far-reaching indictment ready, stood poised to press its criminal case. This marked the beginning of the final act in the saga of Kwon and the Terra-Luna collapse, the courtroom showdown, where the full weight of the state's criminal justice system would confront the architect of one of the largest financial frauds in digital history. The methodical takedown, spanning continents and years, was now moving toward its ultimate conclusion, preparing to render a final verdict on the very nature of responsibility in the new digital frontier. The immediate aftermath of the Montenegrin extradition ruling saw intense diplomatic and legal preparations, while the precise destination remained a subject of final Montenegrin governmental decision. The overwhelming legal momentum pointed towards the United States. The U.S. Department of Justice had meticulously built its criminal case, an 8-count indictment that laid bare the alleged deception at the heart of the Terra-Luna ecosystem. These charges, including conspiracy to commit wire fraud, commodities fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy to defraud and engage in market manipulation, were not abstract legal concepts. They represented the direct translation of billions in investor losses into concrete criminal allegations. The U.S. prosecution's strategy was clear: to demonstrate that despite the novelty of cryptocurrency, the fundamental principles of fraud and misrepresentation remained immutable, and that Kwon, as the architect, was criminally liable. This was the ultimate receipt they aimed to secure. Not merely a civil judgment, but a criminal conviction that would send a chilling message across the entire digital asset industry. The methodical takedown, spanning continents and years, was now moving towards its ultimate conclusion. The long arm of the law, initially perceived as slow and ill-equipped to handle the borderless nature of crypto, had relentlessly pursued Kwon, demonstrating its tenacious ability to adapt and overcome jurisdictional complexities. His arrest in Montenegro, his lengthy detention, the civil fraud verdict, And now the final extradition order. Each step was a powerful strike in the hero's relentless campaign for accountability. This relentless pursuit underscored a critical political message. No individual, however influential or technologically advanced, could operate beyond the reach of sovereign states and their collective will to enforce justice. The showdown had evolved from a chaotic market crash to a precise legal reckoning, culminating in the architect of the collapse being brought to the very precipice of criminal trial. This final act promised to be a landmark case, one that would redefine the boundaries of responsibility and regulation in the volatile, innovative world of digital finance, setting a powerful precedent for future enforcement actions against those who exploit emerging technologies for illicit gain. The stage was now meticulously set for the ultimate confrontation, a legal battle that would determine not just Kwon's fate, but potentially the future trajectory of global crypto regulation. The hero, the collective might of international justice, stood ready for the decisive blow. The moment Terra-Luna's peg shattered was not a quiet market correction. It was an explosive detonation heard around the world, triggering a cascade of human and political fallout. Across continents, screens flickered with crimson charts, a digital bloodbath playing out in real time in the trading pits of Seoul, the bustling financial districts of London, and the quiet home offices of Main Street America. Investors watched in horror as their portfolios, once symbols of digital prosperity, disintegrated into mere fractions of a cent. Imagine the faces, pale, disbelieving, then rapidly contorting into expressions of despair and fury. A young couple, who had invested their life savings, stared blankly at a screen displaying an impossible zero. A seasoned trader, who had seen market crashes before, pounded his desk, overwhelmed by the sheer velocity of this unprecedented collapse. The silence in some rooms was deafening, a testament to the shock, while in others, shouts of outrage echoed. The images that emerged were not just of abstract financial loss, but of tangible human suffering. News channels broadcast segments of distraught individuals recounting how their retirement funds had vanished, their children's college savings erased, their dreams of a secure future abruptly extinguished. Online forums, once vibrant communities celebrating shared wealth, transformed into digital wailing walls, filled with desperate pleas for answers, bitter recriminations, and stories of profound personal tragedy. The sheer scale of the financial ruin, estimated in excess of $40 billion, was almost incomprehensible. Yet its impact was acutely felt by millions. This immediate, visceral reaction fueled a political firestorm. The viral reaction was instantaneous and overwhelming. On social media platforms, streams of angry posts demanded justice, accountability, and immediate government intervention. The sentiment was raw and unfiltered, reflecting a collective sense of betrayal. Discussions exploded across every digital channel, from encrypted messaging groups to public microblogging sites, dissecting the collapse, pointing fingers, and sharing personal stories of devastation. The outrage spread like wildfire, amplifying calls for regulatory action and sparking intense debates about the very nature of decentralized finance. Hashtags, though not spoken aloud, formed the backbone of this digital roar, solidifying the narrative of a monumental failure and a profound betrayal of trust. The internet became a global town square, where the victims of the collapse found solidarity in their shared loss and amplified their demands for state action. In the corridors of power, the atmosphere was thick with urgency and alarm. Emergency meetings were convened in capital cities across Asia, Europe, and North America. Finance ministers, central bankers, and regulatory chiefs huddled, their expressions grim, grappling with the unprecedented challenge of a borderless financial implosion. The images flashed across newswires, stern-faced officials emerging from closed-door sessions, promising swift investigations and robust responses. This wasn't merely a market downturn. It was a crisis that directly challenged governmental authority and its ability to protect its citizens in a rapidly evolving digital landscape. The political fallout was immediate and undeniable. Lawmakers previously hesitant to impose strict regulations on the burgeoning crypto industry now faced an undeniable mandate for action. Congressional hearings were swiftly scheduled, parliamentary debates erupted, and international bodies like the G7 and the Financial Stability Board placed cryptocurrency regulation at the top of their agendas. The collapse of Terra-Luna became the definitive catalyst, transforming abstract discussions about digital asset risks into concrete demands for legislative action and stringent oversight. The images of panicked investors and the digital roar of public anger served as a constant, undeniable backdrop to these high-stakes political maneuvers, ensuring that the fallout from this financial cataclysm would reverberate through policymaking for years to come, forcing governments to confront their responsibilities in a truly global digital economy. That the digital inferno of Terra-Luna's collapse ignited a profound shift in public perception, transforming the narrative of crypto from one of unfettered innovation and financial liberation to a cautionary tale of systemic risk and potential fraud. Images of shattered financial dreams, relayed through mainstream media and amplified by furious online commentary, created an undeniable moral imperative for political action. Legislators, once content to allow the crypto space to evolve with minimal intervention, now found themselves under immense pressure to deliver concrete safeguards. The human face of the financial devastation from retirees seeing their savings vanish to young families losing their down payments became a powerful catalyst for policy change. This public outcry was not confined to a single nation. It was a global phenomenon, underscoring the interconnectedness of digital finance and the widespread vulnerability of investors worldwide. This wave of public anger translated directly into political will. In Washington, D.C., the discourse around stablecoins, once a niche topic for financial technologists, was catapulted onto the front pages. The U.S. Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve intensified their warnings, emphasizing the need for robust regulatory frameworks to prevent future catastrophes. Congressional committees convened urgent hearings, bringing in experts and industry leaders, often subjecting them to aggressive questioning about the lack of consumer protection and the inherent volatility of algorithmic stablecoins. The political theater was palpable. Stern lawmakers demanding answers, highlighting the vulnerability of everyday citizens to complex, opaque financial instruments. This period saw a rapid acceleration of legislative proposals aimed at bringing stablecoins under the purview of traditional banking laws, treating them less as innovative digital assets and more as highly sensitive financial products requiring stringent oversight. Across the Atlantic, European Union policymakers, already in the advanced stages of drafting comprehensive crypto regulations, found their resolve strengthened. The Terra-Luna implosion served as stark validation for their cautious, protection-first approach. The Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation, or MiCA, which had been years in the making, gained new urgency and political backing, with specific provisions for stablecoins becoming a central focus. Images of European Parliament sessions showed animated debates, with officials citing the Terra-Luna disaster as irrefutable proof of the need for an overarching, harmonized regulatory framework across all member states. This was a clear political statement. Europe intended to lead the way in establishing a regulated, responsible digital asset market, fundamentally rejecting the laissez-faire approach that had allowed such a collapse to occur. Even in Asia, particularly South Korea, the epicenter of Do Kwon's operations, the political reaction was immediate and deeply personal. The collapse hit close to home, affecting a significant portion of the retail investor base. The South Korean Financial Services Commission and the Financial Supervisory Service launched aggressive investigations, intensifying their crackdown on illicit trading and pushing for stronger investor protection laws. The public sentiment in South Korea was particularly vitriolic, demanding not just regulation but severe penalties for those deemed responsible. This intense domestic pressure underscored a universal truth: when ordinary citizens are harmed on such a massive scale, governments are compelled to act, transforming abstract financial concepts into urgent matters of political accountability and national security. The fallout from Terra-Luna reshaped the global regulatory landscape, forcing a fundamental reckoning with the risks of decentralized finance and cementing the undeniable role of the state in safeguarding financial stability and protecting its populace, no matter how borderless the technology. The reverberations extended to global economic summits, where cryptocurrency regulation ascended from a fringe topic to a central agenda item. Groups of the world's leading economies, once divided on how to approach digital assets, now found a common enemy in the systemic risks exposed by declarations from international bodies emphasized the urgent need for comprehensive and coordinated global frameworks to mitigate risks, protect consumers, and prevent digital assets from becoming conduits for illicit finance. This unified political front was a direct consequence of the widespread financial pain, transforming a technological debate into a high-stakes geopolitical challenge. The imagery conveyed a sense of growing unity among diverse governments, all facing similar pressures, from their populations to bring order to the digital chaos. The very notion of an unregulated Wild West crypto market was effectively declared over by a chorus of world leaders. The public outcry also intensified scrutiny on the crypto industry itself. Many within the sector, initially defensive, began to acknowledge the necessity of regulation, recognizing that continued instability and fraud would ultimately stifle innovation and erode what little trust remained. This shift in internal perception, driven by the stark reality of the Terra-Luna aftermath, created a window for dialogue between industry players and regulators, albeit a tense one. The images here would be of industry conferences, once celebratory, now featuring somber discussions on compliance and risk management. The pressure from the public, expressed through countless online posts and media reports highlighting victim stories, became a powerful lever for politicians seeking to impose order. The collective trauma of the collapse etched itself into the public consciousness, ensuring that future legislative efforts would be met with broad support, cementing the narrative that state intervention was not just desirable, but absolutely essential for the survival and responsible growth of the digital economy. The political will, forged in the crucible of this catastrophic failure, proved to be an unstoppable force, demonstrating that even the most revolutionary technologies could not escape the fundamental demands of public protection and governmental oversight. The catastrophic implosion of Terra-Luna did more than just wipe out fortunes. It fundamentally reshaped the global political landscape, forcing a stark reevaluation of the burgeoning digital economy. The initial shock quickly gave way to a unified, if still evolving, political response. Images of parliamentary debates and congressional hearings now prominently featured impassioned pleas for greater oversight, a dramatic shift from the earlier, more hands-off approach to crypto innovation. The narrative pivoted sharply. No longer was cryptocurrency solely seen as a disruptive force for good, but also as a potential source of systemic risk and widespread consumer harm, demanding immediate and robust governmental intervention. This marked a profound ideological victory for proponents of traditional financial regulation, who had long warned of the dangers of an unregulated, borderless financial frontier. The fallout from Terra-Luna accelerated legislative processes across major economies. In the United States, the collapse served as a powerful catalyst for lawmakers to push for comprehensive stablecoin regulation. Suddenly, the complex technicalities of algorithmic pegs and collateralization were being dissected in public forums, often by politicians seeking to demonstrate their grasp of the crisis and their commitment to investor protection. News segments showcased experts testifying before stern committees, while media headlines screamed for accountability. This public pressure ensured that the issue remained at the forefront of the political agenda, preventing it from being dismissed as a niche financial problem. The very real human stories of loss, shared widely online and in traditional media, imbued the abstract financial collapse with a palpable sense of urgency, forcing politicians to respond to the tangible suffering of their constituents. Internationally, the collapse spurred an unprecedented level of cooperation among financial regulators and law enforcement agencies. Global bodies, including the Financial Stability Board and the International Monetary Fund, intensified their calls for a coordinated global regulatory framework for digital assets. Leaders at summits and ministerial meetings echoed a common sentiment. The borderless nature of crypto demanded a synchronized cross-jurisdictional approach to governance. Images from these high-level gatherings depicted world leaders and financial chiefs engaged in serious dialogue, their expressions conveying the weight of the challenge. This collective political will transformed the Terra-Luna crisis from a singular event into a defining moment for global financial governance, a clear signal that the era of regulatory arbitrage in crypto was rapidly drawing to a close. The political message was clear: no digital asset, regardless of its design or its promise of decentralization, would be allowed to operate beyond the reach of sovereign oversight if it posed a threat to financial stability or public trust. The public's viral reaction, though not articulated through specific online tags, coalesced into a potent, undeniable force. Forums and social media platforms became virtual town halls, where the collective anger and demand for justice resonated loudly. Users shared stories of financial ruin, expressed outrage at the perceived impunity of the project's founders, and organized grassroots efforts to pressure politicians and legal authorities. This digital roar served as a continuous backdrop to the political maneuvering, a constant reminder of the human cost of the collapse. It solidified the public's perception that decentralized finance, while innovative, required a strong hand of regulation to protect ordinary citizens from systemic risks and potential exploitation. The political will to act, forged in the crucible of this widespread public outcry, became an unstoppable force, demonstrating that even in the most technologically advanced and globally interconnected financial landscapes, the fundamental demands for accountability and consumer protection would ultimately shape the future of governance. The Terra-Luna implosion thus served as a stark, undeniable testament to the enduring power of public opinion to influence political action, transforming a market catastrophe into a profound reckoning for the future of digital finance. The economic devastation wrought by the Terra-Luna collapse reverberated far beyond the digital realm, landing squarely on the political stage and igniting a global demand for accountability. The images of this fallout were stark, from frantic trading floors flashing red to the somber faces of investors who had lost everything. This was not a silent, abstract market correction. It was a loud, public outcry that forced politicians to confront the very real human cost of unchecked innovation. News reports featured heart-wrenching interviews with individuals who had placed their life savings into what they believed was a secure, revolutionary investment, only to see it vanish overnight. These personal tragedies, amplified across every media channel, transformed a complex financial event into an undeniable political crisis, demanding immediate and decisive government action. The viral reaction was a groundswell of outrage. Online communities, once vibrant hubs of crypto enthusiasm, became torrents of anger and despair. Users shared their stories of ruin, their collective fury fueling a demand for justice that transcended national borders. The sheer volume of this digital lament compelled political leaders to take notice. The sentiment was universal: those responsible must be held accountable. and the system must be reformed to prevent such a catastrophe from ever happening again. This public pressure became an irresistible force, pushing even the most crypto-friendly politicians to adopt a more stringent stance on regulation. The image was clear: millions of voices, unified in their demand for protection, echoing through the digital ether. In response, governments worldwide moved with a newfound urgency. Regulatory bodies, previously cautious or even hesitant to intervene in the burgeoning crypto space, now adopted an aggressive posture. In the United States, congressional hearings became platforms for stern warnings and calls for immediate legislative action. Lawmakers pressed industry executives on issues of transparency, consumer protection, and systemic risk. The U.S. Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve, the traditional guardians of financial stability, issued increasingly emphatic statements on the need for comprehensive oversight of stablecoins and other digital assets, framing the issue as a matter of national financial security. This political will, forged in the crucible of public outrage, transformed abstract policy debates into concrete legislative initiatives. The political system, initially slow to react to the rapid pace of digital finance, was now playing catch-up. With unprecedented speed driven by the undeniable imperative to restore public trust and prevent future collapses. Across the globe, the Terra-Luna implosion spurred a remarkable degree of international cooperation. Nations that had once pursued disparate approaches to crypto regulation now recognized the interconnectedness of the digital economy and the shared vulnerability to borderless financial crises. Summits of leading economies, including the G7 and G20, elevated crypto regulation to a top-tier agenda item. Statements from these international bodies emphasized the urgent need for harmonized global standards, cross-border data sharing, and synchronized enforcement actions to effectively police the decentralized financial landscape. The imagery conveyed a sense of a united front forming against the perceived anarchy of unregulated crypto, with world leaders and financial ministers demonstrating a shared commitment to imposing order. This collective political resolve, born from the shared trauma of the Terra-Luna fallout, marked a definitive turning point. It signaled the end of the Wild West era for digital finance, ushering in a new chapter where the long arm of state authority, though initially challenged, would ultimately extend its reach across the entire global digital economy, ensuring that accountability and consumer protection became paramount. The political showdown, sparked by a catastrophic market failure, was now firmly entrenched as a global battle for the future of financial governance. The catastrophic unraveling of Terra-Luna echoes far beyond the digital markets, resonating as a profound, universal lesson for an interconnected world. It vividly exposed the inherent fragility of even the most intricately designed algorithmic systems when untethered from robust, centralized oversight. Recall the image of billions suspended precariously, a digital clock ticking towards an unseen precipice. That precipice, once abstract, became terrifyingly real, demonstrating that the promise of unshakable stability, when built on unchecked innovation, can shatter with breathtaking speed, obliterating wealth and trust in its wake. This implosion proved that no financial construct, however revolutionary its design or ambitious its founders, can truly escape the fundamental laws of economics and the imperative of human accountability. The digital assets, once hailed as paragons of decentralized freedom, ultimately revealed their vulnerability to manipulation and systemic risk, much like any other financial instrument. This grand experiment, meant to redefine trust without intermediaries, instead underscored the enduring, indispensable role of established authority. The lesson is clear. Innovation, while vital, must be tempered by regulation. The pursuit of progress cannot come at the cost of stability or the profound protection of ordinary citizens. The notion that a new financial frontier could exist entirely beyond the reach of sovereign states was revealed to be a dangerous illusion. The very foundation of global finance, which had seen its digital clocks ticking towards a new era, was violently reminded of the immutable need for guardrails, for human oversight, and for the unwavering hand of justice to prevent chaos. The Terra-Luna saga became a powerful, undeniable testament to the enduring power of the state to assert its will, even in the most borderless of digital realms. It served as a stark reminder that while technology can advance at dizzying speeds, the core principles of responsibility and regulation remain timeless, ultimately encompassing even the most audacious digital empires. The ticking digital clocks now count down not just to market movements, but to a future where financial freedom is balanced by systemic security. The catastrophic unraveling of Terra-Luna echoes far beyond the digital markets, resonating as a profound, universal lesson for an interconnected world. It vividly exposed the inherent fragility of even the most intricately designed algorithmic systems when untethered from robust, centralized oversight. Recall the image of billions suspended precariously, a digital clock ticking towards an unseen precipice. That precipice, once abstract, became terrifyingly real, demonstrating that the promise of unshakable stability, when built on unchecked innovation, can shatter with breathtaking speed, obliterating wealth and trust in its wake. This implosion proved that no financial construct, however revolutionary its design or ambitious its founders, can truly escape the fundamental laws of economics and the imperative of human accountability. The digital assets, once hailed as paragons of decentralized freedom, ultimately revealed their vulnerability to manipulation and systemic risk, much like any other financial instrument. This grand experiment, meant to redefine trust without intermediaries, instead underscored the enduring, indispensable role of established authority. The lesson is clear. Innovation, while vital, must be tempered by regulation. The pursuit of progress cannot come at the cost of stability or the profound protection of ordinary citizens. The notion that a new financial frontier could exist entirely beyond the reach of sovereign states was revealed to be a dangerous illusion. The very foundation of global finance, which had seen its digital clocks ticking towards a new era, was violently reminded of the immutable need for guardrails, for human oversight, and for the unwavering hand of justice to prevent chaos. The Terra-Luna saga became a powerful, undeniable testament to the enduring power of the state to assert its will, even in the most borderless of digital realms. It served as a stark reminder that while technology can advance at dizzying speeds, the core principles of responsibility and regulation remain timeless. Ultimately encompassing even the most audacious digital empires, the ticking digital clocks now count down not just to market movements, but to a future where financial freedom is balanced by systemic security. The catastrophic unraveling of Terra-Luna echoes far beyond the digital markets, resonating as a profound, universal lesson for an interconnected world. It vividly exposed the inherent fragility of even the most intricately designed algorithmic systems when untethered from robust, centralized oversight. Recall the image of billions suspended precariously, a digital clock ticking towards an unseen precipice. That precipice, once abstract, became terrifyingly real, demonstrating that the promise of unshakable stability, when built on unchecked innovation, can shatter with breathtaking speed, obliterating wealth and trust in its wake. This implosion proved that no financial construct, however revolutionary its design or ambitious its founders, can truly escape the fundamental laws of economics and the imperative of human accountability. The digital assets, once hailed as paragons of decentralized freedom, ultimately revealed their vulnerability to manipulation and systemic risk, much like any other financial instrument. This grand experiment, meant to redefine trust without intermediaries, instead underscored the enduring, indispensable role of established authority. The lesson is clear. Innovation, while vital, must be tempered by regulation. The pursuit of progress cannot come at the cost of stability or the profound protection of ordinary citizens. The notion that a new financial frontier could exist entirely beyond the reach of sovereign states was revealed to be a dangerous illusion. The very foundation of global finance, which had seen its digital clocks ticking towards a new era, was violently reminded of the immutable need for guardrails, for human oversight, and for the unwavering hand of justice to prevent chaos. The Terra-Luna saga became a powerful, undeniable testament to the enduring power of the state to assert its will, even in the most borderless of digital realms. It served as a stark reminder that while technology can advance at dizzying speeds, the core principles of responsibility and regulation remain timeless. Ultimately encompassing even the most audacious digital empires, the ticking digital clocks now count down not just to market movements, but to a future where financial freedom is balanced by systemic security. It is a future where the promise of immense wealth must coexist with the bedrock of public trust, forged not by algorithms alone, but by the watchful eye of collective governance. The dramatic downfall of Terra-Luna stands as an enduring, chilling narrative, forcing a global reevaluation of how societies integrate revolutionary digital technologies, while safeguarding the very stability that underpins their economies and protects their citizens from unforeseen, catastrophic risks. The Terra-Luna collapse fundamentally altered the global perception of decentralized finance. It exposed a critical vulnerability, the absence of a central guarantor for algorithmic stability, a gap that the traditional financial system fills with central banks and regulatory bodies. The ticking digital clocks of S1, representing the relentless, unyielding march of market forces, suddenly became a countdown to a systemic failure, not just a price fluctuation. This was a stark reminder that while technology can remove human intermediaries, it cannot remove the need for trust, accountability, and ultimately, a safety net. The lesson learned is that innovation, however grand its promise, must be subjected to a rigorous framework of oversight to prevent catastrophic societal impact. The state, once seen by some crypto proponents as an anachronism, reasserted its indispensable role as the ultimate protector of public interest and financial stability. The billions that vanished did not merely disappear. They left behind a clear mandate for political action, a demand for robust regulation that extends to every corner of the digital economy. This global awakening solidified the notion that while freedom and decentralization are powerful ideals, they must be balanced by an equally powerful commitment to security, transparency, and the rule of law. The precipice of S1 was not just a market event. It was a profound political moment, forcing governments to define their authority in a new, borderless financial world, ensuring that the ticking clocks of digital progress are guided by foresight, not just by speed. The future of digital finance will forever bear the indelible mark of Terra-Luna's fall, a perpetual reminder that unchecked ambition, however visionary, ultimately bows to the immutable laws of human governance and accountability. This cataclysmic event shattered the illusion of a truly ungoverned digital frontier. It painted a vivid picture of the immense human cost when financial innovation outpaces regulatory wisdom. The universal lesson resonated globally. No matter how complex the algorithm or how compelling the vision of a borderless currency, the fundamental responsibilities of investor protection and market integrity remain paramount. Governments, initially hesitant to intervene in such a novel space, were compelled to act, transforming the abstract concept of digital assets into a tangible matter of national security and economic stability. The very notion of financial sovereignty, challenged by the decentralized ethos, was vigorously reasserted. This was a turning point, signaling a shift from a Wild West mentality to an era demanding greater scrutiny, international cooperation, and a clear legal framework. The ticking clocks of global finance now measure not only market cycles but also the accelerated pace of regulatory reform. The future of digital currencies, once envisioned as entirely free from state influence, is now inextricably linked to the evolving landscape of global governance, a direct consequence of Terra-Luna's epic failure. The precipice, once a distant threat, became a stark lesson in the urgent need for balance between innovation and oversight, ensuring that the next wave of digital transformation is built on a foundation of trust and accountability. Not just audacious technological promise, the collapse of Terra-Luna stands as a stark warning etched into the annals of digital finance, a testament to the colossal stakes when unchecked innovation collides with the bedrock of public trust. Its devastating legacy continues to shape policy discussions globally, compelling governments toward greater accountability and stringent oversight in the crypto space. The legal battles against its architect may near their conclusion, but the political reverberations will echo for years, fundamentally altering how nations define and govern the digital economy. If this deep dive into power and market volatility resonated with you, consider subscribing for more analyses of critical political showdowns. And for another story of high-stakes deception where a charismatic figure similarly misled an entire industry, exposing a complex web of influence and ambition, we highly recommend Billions of Lies: How She Deceived Silicon Valley. Open the on-screen card to watch it now.